Okay, welcome to our next video for Abnormal Psych. This one is on schizophrenia and dissociative identity disorder. It's important that you know that these two things are often confused with one another, but they are not the same thing. So first, schizophrenia. We talked about how if depression is the common cold of mental disorders, well, then we can consider schizophrenia the cancer of the mental disorder world. Not that it's more rare, it's not as common, but it is more complex as well. Nearly 1 in 100 people suffer from schizophrenia, and about 24 million people suffer from it worldwide. It tends to strike young people as they mature into adulthood, and symptoms start to appear between the ages of 18 and 20. It affects both men and women equally. However, men that do suffer from it more severely than women do. Symptoms of schizophrenia. Well, first of all, the literal translation of schizophrenia does mean split mind. It's actually a group of disorders all jumbled together, and the characterizations of them are disorganized and delusional thinking, disturbed perceptions, which are your hallucinations, and inappropriate emotions or actions. Disorganized thinking and delusions. Many psychologists believe that these disorganized thoughts occur because of selective attention failure in your brain. You're not able to block anything out, and it's just coming through. So the result is these fragmented, bizarre thoughts that just spill out in absolutely no particular order here. And the picture that I have here, if you look at it, is an example of that. You're not being able to filter out your mind, and it's all these different things are coming in from all these different places, and it's just coming out, and there's no filter. Then you have your disturbed perceptions. These are your hallucinations. So this is your delusions. These are your hallucinations. A schizophrenic person may perceive things that are not actually there, again, and this is a good illustration of that. They may have inappropriate emotions or actions. Their emotions or actions are inappropriate for that given situation. So, for example, they may laugh at the news of somebody just died, or they may show no emotion at all. And when they do that, it's often referred to as flat affect or apathy. We have subtypes of schizophrenia, right? So there's different types. It's, again, schizophrenia itself is a cluster of disorders. These subtypes share some features, but there are other symptoms that differentiate the different subtypes. All of them, though, do have positive symptoms, negative symptoms, acute and chronic. We'll talk about the difference between those. So positive symptoms are where you're going to add, all right? So you're adding the presence of a problematic behavior. You are adding an abnormal behavior. It doesn't mean, oh, it's a good thing. No, it means you're adding a bad thing. This is the hallucinations that get added. So illusionary perceptions. Most of them are actually auditory. Your delusions get added, disorganized thoughts. So these are the additions of the problematic stuff. You also get negative symptoms. Negative symptoms are you're taking away healthy behaviors. So that's where you have your flat effect because you have no emotion. You're reducing your social interaction. They tend to be antisocial. So positive symptoms, you're adding negative things. So the abnormal. Negative symptoms is you're decreasing the healthy, if that makes any sense. All right, I talked about delusions. Again, they're distorted false beliefs. You see them in one of two or both ways. Usually, they're delusions of perceptions. For example, they'll feel like someone's out to get them when that's not necessarily true. Or they could have delusions of grandeur, which is thinking like, oh, I'm Superman. Or like you see Homer Simpson here, thinking he's muscular when really he is not. Then you have your hallucinations. They're a perception that occurs without the sensation being there. Most of them, like I said earlier, are auditory. This is where you hear voices, and they tend to actually make insulting statements to you or give orders. For example, the son of Sam, which was a murderer, you can Google him. He basically said that I think it was his neighbor's dog that barked all the time was actually the devil and was telling him to kill people. Distorted speech, we could also call this the word salad, like I mentioned before. All those jumbled thoughts are just coming out in these words that make no sense to the listener. All right, so here's a picture of Bob. We looked at him in class. Disorganized behavior. This is another guy that we're going to look at in class when you come in. You're going to see inappropriate behaviors, may perform sets of compulsive or repetitive acts, such as this is where you're going to see people rocking back and forth, rubbing their arms, scratching their head. They kind of have some tics. And finally, a chronic and acute schizophrenia. Chronic schizophrenia is when it's slow to develop. Chronic also meaning like more serious. So recovery is actually doubtful. Usually it displays a lot of negative symptoms, which again, remember, you're removing the healthy things. So that all that's left is really the abnormal stuff. Schizophrenia that develops rapidly is acute or reactive. The recovery time is much better, and you usually show positive symptoms. So you're adding those abnormal things, the hallucinations, the actions, and delusions. But generally, it comes on so fast, and we're able to treat it much, much better than something that's taken time and is really embedded itself and developed. So those are the things that they all share. All right. Then you have these are the actual subtypes of schizophrenia. You could be a paranoid schizophrenic. We've talked about that before. That's where you're plagued by those hallucinations. Often they have negative messages, and the delusions are both grandiose. Um, and then you have your disorganized schizophrenia. This was Bob that we looked at in class. Primary symptoms are flat affect, incoherent speech, and random behaviors. You could be catatonic schizophrenic, which is where you are rarely initiating any control over your movement. You're copying others' speeches and actions. You're really not your own person. You're kind of there. You don't really do anything. There's no, like, you feel that there's no purpose. Those are catatonic schizophrenics. Undifferentiated schizophrenics, they have many varied symptoms. They could have symptoms of being paranoid, disorganized, catatonic. Two of those, it doesn't matter. We can't classify them as any one of the top three there, so we say they're undifferentiated. And finally, your residual schizophrenics, which tend to withdraw, will continue after positive symptoms have disappeared. We'll talk more about that in class. There is, even though it generally develops during your adolescence, there is childhood schizophrenic. Childhood schizophrenia is chronic. This is where you tend to lose touch with reality, which is basically when someone loses touch with reality, that's called a psychosis. This occurs early in life, and because it occurs early in life and it lasts for a long period of time, that's why it's chronic, and it has a very profound effect on child's behavior. This includes the hallucinations, delusions, and all of those other things, which leads to problems carrying out daily, like routine things such as bathing. Like they can't even do that without these interruptions. But again, it is very rare to have childhood schizophrenia. About 1 in 40,000 children suffer from it. To understand schizophrenia, it is a disease of the brain exhibited in the symptoms of the mind. So there can be brain abnormalities. Sometimes there's where there's dopamine overactivity, meaning there's higher levels of dopamine receptors in the brain. Right. So if you see here, all right, your brain releases too much of the neurotransmitter of dopamine, and it's too much of that in your system can cause some issues. We see here some abnormal brain activity. Here's a brain scan showing how abnormal activity is in the frontal lobe, thalamus, and amygdala. So here you have normal adolescence, because in adolescence it actually shows brain lesions. So a normal person, this would be not the function in their brain, but the presence of, you know how when you're going through your adolescence, your neurons and stuff, everything's pruning and you're losing half your mind. So this is what it's like in a normal adolescent. And here is a schizophrenic adolescent. So they're developing all these brain lesions. And that's helping with the schizophrenia. It's what's creating it. You can also have abnormal brain morphology, which is where spots in your brain actually morph and they change shape. So, for example, here You have fluid filled in the vesicles, which creates like a brain change. So this is normal. This is with schizophrenia. All right, you see how the brain is actually changing its shape. Brain anatomy in schizophrenia. In schizophrenia, you tend to have abnormally low function in your frontal lobe. And remember, frontal lobe control, it's your impulse control and decision making. Hallucinations, those happen because there's too much activity in the thalamus. If you remember back to Unit 3, the thalamus is a relay station. All right, it's the one that sends those images from our eyes back to the occipital lobe. Well, the hallucinations, remember, you're not seeing something, but the message is being sent anyway as, oh, I'm seeing something there, but it's not really there. You're not actually seeing it. Well, your thalamus just got confused, and it's sending a message to the occipital lobe, even though nothing triggered it. The greater the shrinkage in your hippocampus that controls your memory and the amygdala, the worse your disorder is going to be. And if the thalamus in your brain is small, the greater difficulty you're going to have filtering out information as well. That's where those jumbled thoughts and words come in. That's what's going to make you act abnormally. So why do these abnormalities occur? Well, some say that there's prenatal problems within the womb. Sometimes it's low birth weight, birth complications, infections from the mom during pregnancy, particularly if she gets the flu, which is influenza, during the middle of fetal development. They can cause some issues. There are also genetic factors. As usual, we talk about twins a lot. 50%, not 50% of identical twins, 50% of schizophrenics that have it, that have an identical twin, their identical twin will also suffer from it. So if one twin has schizophrenia, it's a 50% chance that the other one has it as well. All right, and then here's some statistics between identical twins, fraternal twins, siblings in general. What are the psychological factors? Psychological and environmental factors can trigger schizophrenia if an individual was already genetically predisposed to it. Just because you're genetically predisposed to something and there's something genetic that's there doesn't mean that it's going to manifest itself. Something has to trigger it. So the etiology of schizophrenia, which remember is the cause, so the psychological factors, they say sometimes high stress can trigger it. So families who have excessive critical comments and hostility as well as emotional issues going on, basically that can be what triggers schizophrenia. So some warning signs. One, a mother with long-lasting schizophrenia probably maybe going to pass it on to their child. Complications with birth, such as oxygen deprivation and low birth weight. Short attention span, poor muscle coordination, disruptive and withdrawn behavior, emotional unpredictability, and poor peer relations and solo play. Like they're very to themselves playing, very imaginative. That doesn't mean that when a child does it that they have it. These all together, though, are indicators. Now, the difference, all right, schizophrenia is often misdiagnosed or confused with dissociative disorders. Dissociative disorders are characterized by a separation of critical parts of your personality, right? Your personality, such as your memory, your consciousness, and your identity, that are normally integrated and work together, right, aren't working together. The main one is dissociative identity disorder. We'll talk about it as DID in class because that is just way too much to say. This is where you have two or more distinct personalities, and each can speak, act, and write in different ways. They have their own memories and wishes and impulse, and oftentimes those impulses conflict with other personalities. So you can it's at least two different personalities within the same body, but it could be there's been reported cases of up to 100 personalities in one body. Famous cases of this, we're going to talk about both of these in class a lot more in depth. You can Google it, all right, and watch these movies as well on your own. In the 1950s, there was a case of Chris Sizemore that they made into a movie. It's an old movie called The Three Faces of Eve. Three of Chris's 22 personalities were depicted in the movie. You have Eve White, who's very meek and timid, Eve Black, who's very dominant and carefree, and then we finally meet Jane, who's the very mature and intellectual one. All the same in the same body, but three distinctly different people. Um, the case of Shirley Mason, we call her Sybil. In the early 1950s, she was a substitute teacher and student at Columbia University. She was suffering from these blackouts. She'd black out, she'd wake up, not remember anything that she did. And she started getting psychotherapy with this lady, Cornelia Wilbur, who basically, uh, through using Freudian techniques of free association, was able to find out that all these different personalities within Sybil. It's a fascinating case. We're going to spend a lot more time looking at Sybil in class. I could go on for like hours talking about it. Look it up. Um, there's a couple theories behind the development of DID. First, the psychoanalytic. It's unwanted impulses or memories that you have create that new person, um, and it acts out in otherwise unacceptable impulses or recalls an otherwise unbearable memory that you can't do. So you create this alter, this other personality that does do it. Um, Behavioralists say that everyone is capable of acting in different ways. So you're acting differently, and you feel that you're acting so differently that you feel as if you're another person, and that this is a reinforced behavior. And again, we'll talk about this more in depth in class because there is some controversy behind if DID is a real thing or not. And the controversy of that is there because it is difficult to evaluate because it's so rare. So we really don't have much to go on behind it. They say that they think the root cause of it is most likely from some type of childhood abuse or trauma, and that what it is it's a defense mechanism where you're trying to separate yourself from a very horrific situation. Is something that you mentally cannot deal with, so you black out and you become this other person. It's a defense mechanism. um, all right, so that's all I have for here. All right, so make sure that you've taken some good notes. In fact, Google some of the stuff I told you to in this presentation, and I will see you in class. I'm sure you'll have some good questions for me. This is one of the most interesting subjects that we're going to touch on with this unit. All right, bye-bye.